Welcome to Fraud Friday. I'm Bob Coleman. We're talking loan fraud, bankers, public officials, and borrowers who got caught. In this case, we're talking about a lender. Delaney, Sexton, editor of the Coleman Report. We specialize in content for the banking industry. Delaney, this is a wild story. The BlueAcorn co-founders, we discussed this a couple weeks ago, and we're following up on this. What is truly sad, Delaney, is a lot of people got hurt. We got a number of tremendous comments about people who suffered. These funds were for Main Street. These funds were for employees who were impacted and their families during the COVID-19 shutdown of our country. And these people just were cavalier, and they used this as their ATM to rip off the program and divert the funds from what should have gone to the people that Congress and the president intended to be to. Delaney, what are we talking about in numbers?
Well, as a lender service provider, they brought in over $1 billion in fees.
No. I'm sorry. You misspoke. What, $1 billion?
$1 billion with a B, not an M, a B. It's unbelievable, really.
Go ahead.
According to the congressional report, they brought in over $1 billion, and of that, about $258 million went to the owners, meaning that these two, according to the report, got more than $120 million just for themselves.
Well, they're facing some very serious charges. What bothers me about this also is you see now, 4 years later, Delaney, that when we're talking about this program, everyone is ignoring the good that it did. And as Senator Marco Rubio said, it saved us from a lot of civil unrest. But all that we're talking about is the fraud that was in there. And even though it was a very small amount of fraud, it's capturing all the headlines. So I'm glad to see the Department of Justice is going after these fraudsters. This also originated from a report in Congress. And Delaney, I want to delve into that.
Well, just to give some background specifically on BlueAcorn, lenders went to them seeking fraud prevention, eligibility verification, customer support, and other services. And you could say they delivered on that. It says in 2021 alone, they received 1.7 million applications, and they sent about 740 of those applications to the lenders for approval and funding.
740,000. Yeah, go ahead.
740,000.
So and for that $12 billion, they got a sizable fee, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about those fees that they pocketed and fraudulently conveyed in themselves. But let's go back. Give us a little bit more history of this, please.
They worked with two of the biggest PPP lenders, Prestamos and Capital Plus, and as you can see here, Prestamos paid them $700 million in PPP processing fees, Capital Plus $386 million in PPP processing fees, and under these agreements, they received up to 70% of all of the processing fees that the lenders were receiving from SBA for their work with PPP.
Delaney, part of the reason for getting these fees is they were going to do due diligence on these applications to ensure that they were eligible and that they weren't fraudulent applications. That's why the lenders were willing to pay up to 70% of the fees. How did they do in that charge of their duties?
Well, they maybe did not follow through, and there's some quotes straight from the source here that really paints the picture. Stephanie Hawkridge said that the company's operation was like building the parachute after we jumped out of the plane. Their CEO, Barry Calhoun, called BlueAcorn a fly by the seat of the pants sort of environment. Another co-founder said they built a fintech airplane while falling from the sky in 3 minutes. Weeks, but who's counting? So they did somewhat outsource some of their work as well. They used Elevate Advisors to review hundreds of thousands of PPP loan applications. And BlueAcorn alone had one direct employee who was helping with processing these PPP loan applications. And then here at Elevate Advisors, they had Kristen Spencer. She was a key supervisor who was handling this. And I will read from her. She said, "I will leave well enough alone. I have higher permissions because up until last week, I was doing a million jobs. I was the DocuSign team, the submit every loan to SBA team, the funding wire reject team, the customer service team, the SBA errors team, the fraud team, plus in charge of processing underwriting team. So welcome and thank you for all you're doing, etc." But that really paints the picture that even their outsourced work was kind of lacking, you could say.
Yeah, they did absolutely no due diligence on these applications. Go ahead.
So not only that, we talked about they brought in over $1 billion in fees, and their one job was fraud prevention and eligibility verification, and they spent less than 1% of their total income on fraud prevention. So let's compare 8.6 million to 1 billion for or eligibility verification. Not much more, just over 1%, 13.7 million.
No, it's amazing. This is simply they had no intention of providing the needed infrastructure that were in the contracts with the lenders and with an SBA.
And they certainly did not seem to spend that money on training for their employees. There was a variety of different people who were providing their personal experience to this congressional committee, and there was one employee or application reviewer who had a lot of really interesting quotes. I was submitting PPP loans to the SBA on the first minute of the first day I started working. I was given no formal or informal training on loan underwriting, as well as no training on how to properly identify and report fake government identification, such as driver's license. I was given no training on how to identify fraudulent tax and bank documents, such as Schedule C and bank transaction history. And on my first day, without knowing what I was doing, but following instructions from my superiors, I submitted at least 300 PPP loans to SBA.
Without any training or understanding of loan underwriting.
And with that, they were expected to submit 30 to 40 applications an hour. Ideally, they said you should only take 30 seconds, but even if we give them the 40 applications an hour, that's a minute and a half for every application.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Go ahead.
So they had a script, a PPP processing script, and this was essentially their training document for people. And I decided to just pull from the pictures because they really tell the story for me. We have to find a balance between processing loans at a consistent rate and detecting fraud. At this point, if you are doubtful of a document authenticity but are not certain, the rule of thumb is to accept it. This action has been taken in response to feedback that we were marking too many documents as fraudulent. So they were told no matter what you saw, unless it was so blatantly fraudulent, go ahead and send it. The borrowers are supposed to verify that this is all true.
Well, if you're touching a document for 30 seconds, all you're doing is taking the number and inputting it into the system to get a loan approval number. That's all you're doing.
And these employees, they made many efforts to try to say, I'm not comfortable with this. That same employee I was quoting earlier had said, you know, this doesn't feel right. I don't think I should be submitting these documents, but they told them to continue on anyway.
Good for them. Go ahead.
In an update, it said, we are looking for extremely obvious fraud. Ronald McDonald or 123 ABC Lane. Watermarks, font size, not aligning, or signature being in an unusual place are extremely detailed discrepancies that you are not expected to identify. Look for computer-generated images, wide-out names, and other obvious fraud. And then, so we had talked about this a little bit a few weeks ago.
This is terrible. This is absolutely, well, I was going to say criminal, and they haven't been indicted for this, but they have been indicted. Go ahead, Delaney.
They had the PPP program. They were putting a lot of their focus on these big dollar loans that would pay out. As she says here, I mean, I don't believe in prioritizing the biggest loans over the smallest, but there should be some understanding that as we get started, closing these monster loans will get everyone paid, and it will take less than 3 minutes to approve this application. So even Stephanie Hawkridge herself said this. Get them through quick, pay attention to the big loans. And then lastly, delete them, who cares? We're not the first bank to decline borrowers who deserve to be funded. They go elsewhere.
Well, I mean, this is a cavalier attitude. They were simply lining their own pockets. They were not providing a service. They were simply inputting numbers, and they obviously did not care about the integrity of the program. And that's what we as an industry are facing today. Go ahead, Delaney.
That is it for this week. But I can't say all of this information is alleged. It came from the report, but so far they are not technically guilty of their crimes. So keep that in mind.
Very good. Very good. We do that. But this comes from the congressional report that they did back in 2022 on this and other rogue actors. And I applaud the Department of Justice for going after these people. We talked about their alleged crimes last week, and we'll follow up on this. But as I said, I'm going to close with this comment that what these people did to be narcissistic and line their own pockets and ignore what the mandate was, it was absolutely criminal, and they are being charged for their alleged crimes. Hey, thank you very much for the video last week. We appreciate the comments and the likes. And I hate doing this when I watch YouTube, but I'm going to do it. Well, we're close to hitting that 1,000 subscriber mark. So if you are so inclined and you like what Delaney did, we'll give her the credit. Give us a subscription. Thanks a lot. This concludes Fraud Friday.
Have a good weekend.